Allons enfants de la patrie, jour de gloire.
The Kingdom of France in the late 1700s was a harsh place for peasants. Income inequality between the rich and the poor was at its highest. It was rough. Climate issues led to crop failures and starvation, making living rather difficult. And the French economy was in tatters. After the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution, the crown was in massive debt and instituted massive taxes on its people that were incredibly unpopular. Oui, oui, monsieur, you shall not be needing your money any longer. This combination of factors led to an uprising of the common people to overthrow the crown and the bourgeoisie. Now, everything wasn't sunshine and rainbows after the revolution. The economy did not magically get better, famine was still a problem, and a fear of counter-revolution hung over the nation. Now, enter the fearless leader of the revolution, Maximilien Robespierre, the savior of the common man. Woohoo! Now, while people were expecting an end to the violence, Max only brought more instability and paranoia with the oncoming of the Reign of Terror. You there, you seem kind of wealthy. Off with his head! Robespierre lived in constant fear of retribution from royal sympathizers in the form of a counter-revolution, so they disbanded the first revolutionary government and created a more radical government called the Directory by kicking out all the moderate members. Now, with seeing all these governmental changes, the people began to have some questions. These leaders that claimed to be working so hard for the people were only accumulating power for themselves, especially Robespierre. When Robespierre collected even more power for his cohort by removing the moderate party and creating the Directory government, his party members realized Max had become too radical for his own good and was guillotined for it. Then, another founding member of the revolution, Georges-Jacques Danton, was guillotined by the new government for supposed opposition against the party. And finally, the last founding revolutionary leader and idealist, Jean-Paul Marat, was stabbed to death by a royal sympathizer, leaving the revolution under completely new leadership, which is not as effective at mobilizing the people. Now, while all of this was going on, the rest of Europe was watching with bated breath, for they feared the spread of a successful revolution to their countries and were willing to do anything to stop this from happening. War. France versus the First Coalition featuring Prussia, Austria, Great Britain, Spain, and the Dutch. The French initially experienced multiple defeats, leading to fears of invasion from foreign powers. Eventually, France began to rack up victories and pieced out Prussia and Austria in 1795. Then Spain flipped sides and helped France occupy the Netherlands, forming the Batavian Republic, and eventually ending the war with Britain in 1797 by signing a peace treaty. Their military success gave the French people a new, resounding feeling of nationalism for their country, with many being extremely supportive of the cause of their nation. It is here that we are introduced to Napoleon Bonaparte, a rising star in the French military and political scenes. He had led a successful military action against the Austrians in Italy in the War of the First Coalition, and then headed a coup to purge the royalists from government, becoming a de facto head of the Republican Party in 1797. Great Britain and Austria are back at it again, joined by Russia, Portugal, Tuscany, Naples, and the Ottoman Empire. And opposing them, we have France, Spain, Denmark, the Polish legions, and a bunch of client states. After Napoleon's failed expedition to Egypt, he returned to France and was hailed as a war hero. While he found that France was winning the war against the Second Coalition, the government at home was weak, unpopular, and bankrupt. He gathered his political allies and led a coup that established him as the first consul, making him the head of state and a dictator in action, but not in name. With him being solely in charge of the country, he now set his sights on the Second Coalition. He again attacked through Italy and the Alps, with the French army winning a score of victories at Castricum, Zurich, Marengo, and a decisive victory at Hohenlinden against the Austrian army. These victories concluded the war in Central Europe, ending the conflict with Russia, Austria, and their Italian allies. Portugal was then capitulated through invasion, and a peace treaty was eventually signed by Britain and France. While winning decisively abroad, he still struggled to consolidate power at home. He faced coup attempts and assassination plots, many led by the old royal family, the Bourbons. He put these to rest by creating a new constitution for the nation, which elevated him to the title of Emperor of France in 1804. Now we have to ask, how does a revolution end with Napoleon Bonaparte as Emperor of France? The French people were tired of the oppression and the taxes of the nobility, so they overthrew them. They fought through years of turmoil, the oncoming of the terror with the executions of tens of thousands of their fellow countrymen, and the constantly changing leadership and governments. The common people just wanted stability. They wanted to stop dying of starvation, and they wanted the economy to return back to normal. Now, who better to turn to than their fearless leader who had gifted them success after success, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France?